Good morning, madam.
Good morning.
I am Marsha Edwards. I will be representing the defence on behalf of my client, Mr. Hanif Anwar. Madam, if it pleases you, may I presume that you are familiar with the facts of the case, or may I assist you in reminding you of the facts?
Actually, if you don't mind, I'm not familiar with the facts of the case, so if you'd like to.
It'd be my pleasure. My client, Mr. Hanif Anwar, had gone to purchase some cigarettes at a petrol station when he noticed Zoe, the victim's car, had the key in the ignition, and he spotted this as the opportunity to get into the car and drive it without having any previous experience. He got in the car and he drove it down, and it got to a traffic light where the car stalled, and in a panic my client ran off. My client, Mr. Anwar, has been charged with taking and driving away a vehicle belonging to another. I would now like to proceed with my submissions, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Thank you, madam. In my plea of mitigation, I would like to highlight two main lines of argument. My client independently takes full responsibility for his actions, both recognising and acknowledging the seriousness of the criminal offence which he has committed, and for this reason, I think it is fair to request that you deal with my client's case on a firm yet compassionate ground. And finally, I would like to suggest to you a sentence which I would like you to sincerely consider. Under the Theft Act, 1968, Section 12, subsection 1, my client has been found guilty. We are here, therefore, today to determine a sentencing of his crime. There are two submissions which I think are of pivotal importance. Firstly, I would like to draw emphasis to the immediate circumstances of the offence, and secondly, I will then go on to the general circumstances which are of invaluable significance in the plight of my client, Mr. Anwar. I would also like to suggest a sentence which is befitting the criminal behaviour which my client was involved in. With your permission, madam, may I proceed to make my first submission?
Yes, you may.
My first submission is the immediate circumstances of the offence. My client, Mr. Anwar, acted very impulsively on the spur of the moment. He saw an unattended car, and took advantage of the circumstance. It was not a premeditated crime, and this could be therefore deemed as sufficient temptation for my client to act. After he struggled to restart the car, after it stalled at the traffic lights, he panicked and ran off. He caused no criminal damage and nobody was injured or hurt. But my client is aware of the possible danger that could have arose and takes full responsibility for his criminal act. Madam, please know that my client had no intention of acting criminally, but for the temptation which stood before him. My second submission is the general circumstances, and there are two areas which I intend to cover. Madam, upon choosing a sentence for my client, please take into consideration his financial hardship and his determination to become an independent, self-sufficient man. My client is unemployed, but actively seeks employment. His only income, unfortunately, is job seeker's allowance. With the little money that he accumulates, he budgets responsibly by saving £5 a week for possible travel expenses to job interviews, and £20 per week he pays board to his uncle. Additionally, the domestic arrangement which my client finds himself in is less than desirable. He lacks stability and guidance. He lives with his uncle with no contact or little contact with his immediate family. Both of the issues which I have outlined should be taken into consideration when sentencing my client. Yes, Mr. Anwar has previous conviction, all of which are minor trivial convictions. He is not a threat to society or his peers. My client has tried to get himself back on track regularly by applying for jobs and budgeting his money, aspiring for better. His criminal behaviour is inspired by temptation, and I am confident that my client would have successfully completed his conditional discharge if he did not see the keys in the ignition. After being in the car and unable to restart it, my client realised the seriousness of what he had done. He is extremely remorseful and earnestly seeks a better way of life by getting a job and finding stability in independence. Therefore, I make a plea to you, madam, in hope that you will consider my 2 submissions that I have made and adequately respond by giving my client 12-month conditional discharge, ensuring that he partakes in 45 hours per week of community service until he finds employment with regular attendance to a probation service. And even when my client finds a job, that he will continue his 12-month conditional discharge. I feel that my client will benefit with more stringent regime and more responsibility than imprisonment or a fine. Thank you, madam, for your time. I would now like to welcome any questions that you have.
Thank you.